The great alien queen Zathira sat alone on her throne, her thoughts clouded by sorrow. Her people, once united and strong, now whispered in fear and uncertainty. They had lost their princess Nara, and with her, the hope of the kingdom. Had passed since Nara was taken, and the queen's heart felt as though it had been torn apart. She had ruled with wisdom and power, but now nothing seemed to matter. Zathira's once mighty voice, which had echoed through the halls of her palace, now felt weak. The queen had not spoken to her people in days. Her only focus was on her daughter, who had been captured by the rival warlord Orcs from the planet Korthos. He had come with a large fleet, overpowering their defenses and taking Nara as a prize. The news had shaken the galaxy. A princess, lost in the hands of a merciless foe, had caused the queen's people to lose hope. There was no word of Nara's condition, only the cold silence of her absence. Zathira couldn't understand why it had to be her daughter. Why her beloved child? Nara was young and full of life. She had been the future of their people. Without her, Zathira felt as though the very heart of the kingdom had been ripped away. Her loyal guards stood at the entrance of her chambers, but they dared not speak. They, too, had seen the queen's sorrow. They had witnessed her once vibrant spirit fade into something darker, quieter, and broken. Even the bravest warriors did not know how to fight back the sorrow that filled her heart. She was no longer the fierce queen they had known. She was a mother, desperate to hold on to the only family she had left. Zathira stared out of the large window, overlooking the palace grounds. The stars twinkled above, distant and cold. They were a reminder of how vast the galaxy was, how small they were in the grand scheme of things. The queen's eyes were filled with unshed tears as she thought of her daughter. Nara had been so full of promise, always so full of laughter, her bright eyes sparkling with curiosity about the world. She had loved her mother, and Zathira had loved her more than words could describe. In the silence, the queen's thoughts drifted to the day Nara had been taken. The fleet had arrived without warning. Zathira's forces had fought bravely, but they had been overwhelmed. The enemy fleet was too strong. Eric's men had raided the palace, destroying everything in their path, taking Nara as their prisoner. She had seen the fear in her daughter's eyes as they separated her from her. And in that moment, Zathira had made a promise to herself. She would not let Nara be forgotten. No matter what, she would bring her back. But months had passed, and still there was no news. Zathira was losing hope, and her people began to fear that their princess would never return. Whispers spread through the kingdom, and some even said that Nara was gone for good. They questioned whether Zathira was still fit to rule. After all, how could a queen lead a kingdom without her daughter? How could a queen who had lost everything still have the strength to carry on? Zathira could not ignore the growing whispers. She heard them every day, but she refused to let them break her. She knew that if she gave in to despair, she would lose. More than just her daughter, she would lose everything. In her mind, Zathira recalled the ancient teachings of her people. She had learned from the greatest leaders in history that a ruler must never show weakness. But how could she hide the pain of losing her child? How could she remain strong when all she wanted to do was weep? She was torn between the duty to her kingdom and the love for her daughter. But just as Zathira thought she might finally surrender to the darkness, a small flicker of hope sparked within her heart. She had received a message. It was faint, but it was enough. The message came from a human warrior, a name unknown to her, but a figure who had heard of her plight. The warrior's name was Marcus Zathira, had never trusted humans. They were a young species, inexperienced in the ways of the galaxy, but there was something different about this message. It wasn't a call for help, it was a declaration. The human warrior, Marcus, had set out on a journey to rescue Princess Nara. It seemed impossible. How could a single human warrior stand a chance against the might of Eric's fleet? And yet, there was something about the message that made Zathira pause. The confidence, the determination in the words, reminded her of something she had lost: hope. She stood up from her throne and paced the room, her thoughts racing. Could this be the answer? Could this human warrior really succeed where her best? Warriors had failed. She did not know, but she was willing to believe in this one small spark. The queen had done everything she could to find Nara, but now, perhaps, the galaxy had sent someone who could do the impossible. Her mind was made up. She would take a chance. She would trust this human warrior and his promise to bring her daughter back. And with that, Zathira sent her response to Marcus. "Return my daughter to me." "Human," she wrote, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. "And I will be in your debt for eternity." For the first time in months, Zathira felt a glimmer of something she had forgotten. Hope. With that hope, she would begin to fight again. Marcus sat in the quiet of his small cabin aboard the ship, staring at the star map in front of him. The galaxy stretched out like a vast ocean, filled with countless dangers and unknowns. Yet, in that moment, his focus was on one thing: the mission to rescue Princess Nara, the lost daughter of the alien queen. He had heard the stories, seen the reports, and read the desperate messages sent out by the queen. He knew the importance of this mission, but it was more than that. It was about doing something right about, helping when others had turned away. Marcus was a soldier, one of the best in the human fleet, but he had never faced a challenge like this. The enemy's stronghold was located deep within enemy territory, far from any human-controlled systems. The enemy was ruthless, and their defenses were nearly impossible to breach. The thought of failure was heavy on his mind, but Marcus had learned to keep his fears at bay. If he hesitated, if he allowed himself to feel doubt, the mission would fail before it even started. So he focused only on the task ahead. His ship, the Black Hawk, was one of the fastest human vessels, capable of evading most enemies. But speed alone wouldn't be enough. Marcus needed to outsmart the enemy. He needed to rely on his training and his instincts. He had survived countless battles and had faced death more times than he cared to remember. But this mission was different. It wasn't just about survival. It was about saving someone, and in doing so, making a stand for humanity. As the ship cruised through the vast emptiness of space, Marcus reviewed his plan once again. He would arrive at the enemy's fortress, infiltrate the facility, and extract Princess Nara. It seemed simple enough, but he knew better than to underestimate his opponents. The enemy's forces would be waiting for him, and the chances of getting through without a fight were slim to none. But Marcus had never been one to back down from a fight. The thought of the princess, trapped in suffering, pushed him forward. As the ship neared its destination, Marcus felt a growing sense of urgency. He thought of the queen who had lost her daughter and was now depending on him to bring her back. The weight of that responsibility settled on his shoulders, but it only made him more determined. He couldn't fail. Not now, not after everything. The queen had endured. The planet Korthos loomed ahead, a desolate world where the enemy had set up their stronghold. The land was barren, covered in jagged rocks and endless deserts. The fortress itself was a massive structure, built into the side of a mountain, its dark silhouette visible against the reddish sky. Marcus had studied it carefully, learning its defenses and weaknesses. He knew it would be nearly impossible to get in unnoticed, but he had a few tricks up his sleeve. The Black Hawk descended into the atmosphere, its engines humming softly as it made its way toward the enemy's base. Marcus's heart raced with each passing moment, but he kept his focus. The mission was still in its early stages, and there was no room for hesitation. He would not fail. As he landed the ship on a rocky plateau just outside the fortress, Marcus quickly gathered his gear. He had everything he needed: weapons, explosives, and a plan. He didn't have much time. The enemy would be on high alert after receiving word of his arrival. Every second counted. With a deep breath, Marcus opened the hatch and stepped outside, the hot wind of Korthos sweeping over him. He adjusted the straps on his armor and took in the barren landscape. It was quiet, but he knew that wouldn't last long. The fortress was just ahead, and with it, his first challenge. The enemy guards were scattered around the entrance to the fortress, but they weren't expecting a stealthy approach. Marcus moved quickly and quietly, his movements practiced and precise. He took down 2 guards silently, making sure not to alert the others. He knew this would be the easy part. The hard part would come once he reached the inner sanctum of the fortress, where Nara was being held. As he moved deeper into the enemy's stronghold, Marcus could feel the tension building. The hallways were dark and narrow, lit only by the flickering lights overhead. The walls seemed to close in on him, but he pushed forward, determined to complete his mission. He moved past more guards, each encounter ending in silence, as he took them out one by one. After what seemed like hours, Marcus reached the lower levels of the fortress where the prisoners were kept. The air was thick with the smell of damp stone and metal. His heart beat faster as he approached the cells. He knew Nara was down here somewhere. The thought of her lost and afraid pushed him onward. He found the room where she was being held was heavily guarded, but Marcus had prepared for this. Using a small explosive device, he disabled the security systems and took out the remaining guards. He stepped inside the dimly lit room and found Nara sitting on the floor, her eyes wide with fear but still alive. Her clothes were ragged and her face showed signs of exhaustion, but there was a fire in her eyes. She looked up at Marcus, unsure of who he was at first. But when their eyes met, she saw the determination in his. He wasn't there to harm her. He was there to save her. "Princess Nara," Marcus said softly, stepping closer. "I've come to take you home." Nara blinked, as if not fully understanding. What was happening? She had been in the dark for so long, both literally and figuratively. But as Marcus extended his hand, she hesitated for a moment before taking it. "Are you... a human?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes," Marcus replied, his tone firm but gentle. "And I'm here to get you out of here, together." They began to move toward the exit, but the battle was far from over. The fortress was on high alert, and the escape would be anything but easy. Marcus knew that the hardest part was yet to come, but with Nara by his side, he felt a renewed sense of strength. He wouldn't let anything stop him now. Marcus and Princess Nara moved quickly through the dark corridors of the enemy fortress. The air was cold, filled with the smell of metal and dust. Marcus's steps were silent, his eyes scanning every corner for danger. Nara, though weak and exhausted from months of captivity, kept up with him, her face a mix of confusion and hope. She had never thought she would be free again, and now here she was, following a human warrior through the very place that had held her prisoner. As they turned a corner, a loud alarm suddenly blared, filling the air with an echoing shriek. Red lights flashed along the walls, and Nara's heart skipped a beat. She knew that once the alarms went off, it would only be a matter of time before the entire fortress was on high alert. The enemy would come for them, and they would stop. At nothing to capture her again, Marcus moved quickly, grabbing Nara's arm and pulling her towards an old maintenance door. He kicked it open, revealing a narrow, dark passageway. The door slammed shut behind them, cutting off the sound of the alarm. But they were not safe yet. The passage was cramped, and Nara had to duck to avoid hitting her head on the low ceiling. She could feel her heart racing in her chest, her breaths coming in short bursts as fear began to take hold. She had been locked away for so long, unsure if anyone cared enough to come for her. Now, in the arms of a human who had come to her rescue, she wasn't sure what to think. But one thing was clear: she trusted Marcus. "Keep up," Marcus whispered, his voice calm but firm. "We need to get to the hangar before they lock it down." Nara nodded, though she wasn't sure how they would make it. The fortress was large, and getting to the hangar meant they had to cross several heavily guarded sections. She could hear footsteps echoing in the distance, signaling that the enemy was already closing in on their location. Marcus moved ahead, leading the way through the darkened hallways. His eyes were sharp, always searching for potential threats. Nara followed closely behind, staying as quiet as possible, her mind racing with thoughts of escape and survival. Her body ached from the long days of confinement, but the thought of freedom kept her moving. They reached another set of doors, this time leading to a wide-open space. The hangar, but it was not empty. Soldiers armed with heavy weapons stood guard, watching over the ships that would take them to safety. Marcus cursed under his breath.
Ow.
They had to get past the guards without being noticed. "Stay close," he murmured, his eyes scanning the room. He crouched low, moving silently along the wall. Nara, too, moved quietly, doing her best to keep her presence hidden. They reached the far side of the hangar without being seen. But just as they were about to make their move towards the ship, a voice called out from behind them. "Stop!" Nara froze. She turned, her heart sinking, as she saw a figure emerge from the shadows. A tall, armored figure with glowing red eyes. It was a commander from the enemy army, one of Eric's top officers. The man's expression was cold, and he raised his weapon, aiming directly at Marcus. Marcus didn't hesitate. He immediately reached for his blaster, but Nara grabbed his arm. "Don't," she whispered urgently. "We can't fight him. We need to escape." The enemy commander smirked, taking a step closer. "You think you can escape? You're not going anywhere?" He raised his weapon higher, preparing to fire. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Wasn't about to give up without a fight. It'd come too far. But before he could act, a loud bang echoed through the room. Yowed. The commander staggered back, his armor dented from a powerful shot. Behind them, a small group of Marcus's allies, humans who had come to help, emerged from the shadows, guns raised. They had followed him into the fortress, providing backup when the time came. Marcus didn't waste a second. He turned to Nara. "Go," he shouted, pushing her toward the ship. Nara didn't need to be told twice. She ran, her legs burning, with exhaustion but pushing forward, driven by the sight of freedom. She glanced over her shoulder to see Marcus and his team holding off the enemy soldiers. They were outnumbered, but they fought with skill and precision. The blaster fire filled the air as the humans held their ground. Recovering, and it wouldn't be long before reinforcements arrived. They had to leave now. Nara reached the ship and climbed aboard, her heart pounding in her chest. She looked out the window and saw Marcus fighting fiercely. He was surrounded, but there was a determination in his eyes that made her want to stay and help. But she knew he was right. They had to leave. They had to get out before it was too late. The ship's engines hummed to life, and Nara strapped herself in, staring out the window. Marcus and his team fought valiantly, but the distance between them grew as the ship ascended. The hangar doors closed behind them, and the ship blasted off into space, leaving the enemy base far below. As they ascended into the cold void of space, Nara couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. She was free, but she had left behind the only life she had known. She thought of her mother, Zathera, the queen who had sent Marcus to rescue her. The queen had always been strong, but Nara knew the loss she must have felt. And now, Nara was on her way back to her, thanks to a human warrior who had risked everything to bring her home. As the ship entered the galaxy's vast expanse, Nara looked out the window and felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in months. She had survived. She had been saved. And now, she was going to return home, where she would finally be reunited with the mother who had never stopped hoping. The stars outside the ship's viewport twinkled like distant diamonds, their light casting a soft glow over Nara's face. She sat in the seat, her body tired, but her mind still racing. I had been rescued by a warrior who had defied impossible odds, risking everything to save her from the clutches of her captors. She had never imagined such a rescue could happen, yet here she was, in the safe, comforting embrace of this strange but brave human, and with every passing second, she felt more alive. Marcus stood at the controls, his eyes focused on the star map. The Black Hawk was moving swiftly through space, but Nara knew the enemy would not give up easily. Their fortress had been strong, and despite the fact they had escaped, they weren't out of danger yet. Enemy would surely chase them. "Marcus." Nara spoke quietly, breaking the silence that had settled between them. "Do you think we're safe?" Marcus glanced over at her, his expression calm but serious. He had been through battles before, and he wasn't one to show fear. "Not yet," he said simply. "We'll need to make sure they don't follow us." Nara nodded, feeling a lump in her throat. She had lived her life with so many fears, but now she felt a new kind of fear, the fear of the unknown. Know what would happen next, where they would go, or how long it would take to get home. The only thing she knew was that Marcus had kept his word. He had rescued her. The human warrior had shown remarkable skill as they made their way through the fortress, using his quick thinking and bravery to defeat enemies that outnumbered them. It had been a blur, a fight for survival, but now that they were in space, Nara felt like she could breathe again. It was hard to believe the nightmare was truly over. Still, the thought of returning home to her mother, the queen, filled her with a sense of hope. "Where are we going?" she asked after a moment. "We'll make a quick jump to a neutral system, then head to your planet," Marcus replied. "We can't risk going straight to your homeworld just yet. Too many enemies will be on our tail." Nara bit her lip, looking out the window at the vastness of space. It was strange how small everything seemed out here. The stars, the ships, even the war she had been caught in. All of it seemed so distant now. But the thought of being with her mother again was a warmth she couldn't deny. Marcus was right. They were not out of danger yet. But at least for now, they had some time. Some time to breathe, to recover, and maybe even to plan for the final step. The return to her home world. The ship hummed steadily, the soft sound of its engines providing a sense of comfort. But Nara's mind couldn't quiet. She had thought of her mother every day since her capture. How had Zathira been holding up? Had she lost all hope? Nara knew the queen well enough to understand that her mother would never give up. It had been months, and the longer she stayed away, the more difficult it would be to return to the life she had once known. "What if she thinks I'm dead?" Nara whispered, her voice full of fear. Marcus paused, his hand hovering over the ships. "Controls." He looked at her with a soft expression, something in his eyes that was almost comforting. "Your mother loves you, Nara. She hasn't given up, and she won't stop looking for you until she finds you. Don't doubt that." The reassurance in Marcus's words gave Nara some peace, but there was still a nagging fear in her heart. She had seen the way her mother had changed after she was taken. The once strong and confident queen had grown weak with grief. Nara had been her pride, her future. And now, she feared what her mother's heart might look like after so much time apart. She turned back to Marcus, trying to keep her voice steady. "What happens if we can't outrun them? They catch up to us?" Marcus didn't hesitate. "Then we fight. I didn't come this far to let you go back into their hands." Nara stared at him for a long moment, feeling a mix of gratitude and awe. He was right. He had risked his life to save her, and now he was willing to go to even greater lengths to ensure she would be safe. She had always believed that warriors fought for glory, for honor, but Marcus wasn't fighting for that. He was fighting for her, and that thought filled her with something new, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Trust. After a long moment of silence, Nara spoke again. "Why did you do this? I'm just a princess. You don't even know me." Marcus's eyes softened, his face serious but not cold. "You're not just a princess, Nara. You're a person. And no one should have to go through what you've been through. I couldn't just sit back and let that happen." Nara was speechless. She had never thought of herself that way. She had always been the daughter of the queen, expected to be strong, to lead. But hearing Marcus say those words made her feel like she mattered. Like her life was important in a way that wasn't tied to her title or her mother's power as the ship continued its journey. The distance between them and the enemy fortress grew. Marcus kept a watchful eye on the scanners, while Nara leaned back in her seat, trying to relax for the first time in what felt like forever. The nightmarish memories of the enemy stronghold of the days she had spent locked away in darkness began to fade. She still carried the weight of those memories, but now there was a glimmer of hope. The stars outside grew brighter as they entered a neutral system. Marcus pushed a few buttons on the control panel, initiating a jump to the next galaxy. The ship surged forward, the familiar hum of its engines growing stronger as it made the jump. Nara closed her eyes, letting herself imagine what it would be like to see her mother again. The feeling of safety, of being home, was something she had longed for. She didn't know what would happen when they arrived. But she knew one thing. Whatever lay ahead, she wouldn't face it alone. Marcus had kept his promise. He had brought her back from the edge of despair, and now they were heading home. The Black Hawk glided silently through the stars, its engines purring steadily. Nara gazed out the window, watching the endless sea of stars stretching out before her. The feeling of relief was growing inside her. The ship had made it past the neutral zone without any sign of pursuit. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, she felt like she could finally rest. But there was still the journey ahead, one that would take them to her mother. The Queen. Nara's thoughts drifted to Zathira. Her mother? The Queen had always been a symbol of strength and power, someone who commanded respect. But Nara knew that her mother was hurting, just as she had. The months of separation had been painful for them both, and the weight of it all sat heavily on Nara's heart. She longed to be back in the palace, to see her mother's face, to feel her embrace. But there was more to it than just returning home. There was the fear of how Zathira would react to the news of her rescue. Nara wasn't sure how her mother would feel after so long. Would Zathira still see her as the princess she once was, or would everything have changed? The thought made her uneasy. She turned away from the window and looked over at Marcus, who was sitting at the controls, his face focused. The human warrior had been a constant presence since her rescue, and she had come to rely on him more than she ever expected. He had not only fought to save her life, but had become a protector, someone she could trust in a way she hadn't known before. Marcus, Nara began softly, her voice uncertain. What happens when we get to my home world? Marcus glanced over at her, his expression calm. When we get there, we'll land, and we'll make sure it's safe before anything else happens. Your mother will be waiting for you, and she know that you're safe. I know, Nara said quietly. But what if things aren't the same anymore? What if she does recognize me? Marcus turned fully to face her now, his eyes filled with understanding. Oh, you're still her daughter, Nara. Nothing changes that. Not time, not distance, not what happened while you were gone. She's anything like the mother I'm sure she is. She'll want you back with open arms. His words were simple, but they brought a sense of calm to Nara's troubled mind. She had been so focused on what she might face when she returned that she had forgotten what really mattered, reuniting with her mother, with her people. Despite the trials they had both endured, the love they shared was stronger than anything that had tried to tear them apart. As the hours passed, stars outside began to shift, indicating that they were getting closer to their destination. The time for questions and doubts was running out. Soon they would be there, and Nara would finally be back in the place she had left behind. Marcus broke the silence. We're almost there. We'll have to be careful. The closer we get, the more dangerous it could be. I've got a few tricks left up my sleeve, but the real challenge will be getting past any remaining enemies that might be waiting. Nara nodded, her hands gripping the armrests of her seat. She knew Marcus was right. The enemy would not let her go so easily. They would come after her, just as they had done before. But now she wasn't alone. She had Marcus, and that made all the difference. The ship's engines hummed. And a few moments later, Marcus's voice broke through the quiet. We're entering your planet's atmosphere now. Hold on, Nara. It's going to be a rough ride. The turbulence was immediate. The ship shook as it plunged into the atmosphere, the sound of the engines roaring against the thick air. Nara gripped her seat tighter, her body tensing, but she trusted Marcus. He had gotten them this far. He wouldn't fail her now. Just a little longer, Marcus said, his voice steady despite the rough flight. The ship descended through the clouds, and Nara could see the outline of her homeworld below green fields, shining cities, and the towering mountains that marked the edge of her kingdom. It felt like a dream, like something she had only imagined in the dark of her cell. As they approached the palace, Nara's heart began to race. This was it. She was almost home. The landing was smooth despite the turbulence, and the Black Hawk touched down on the landing pad with a gentle thud. Marcus immediately began powering down the ship, his movements quick and efficient. Nara stood up slowly, her legs shaky from the long journey. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Are you ready? Marcus asked, glancing at her. Nara looked at him, her heart full of gratitude. I don't know if I'll ever be ready, she said softly. But I'm as ready as I can be. Marcus gave her a small smile. You don't have to be ready. You just have to go. I'll be right here with you. With that, Nara nodded and walked toward the exit. Marcus followed closely behind her. The moment the ramp lowered, Nara was hit by the familiar sights and sounds of her home world. The scent of the air, the buzz of the city in the distance, it all felt so right, but also so overwhelming. They made their way toward the palace entrance. Nara's heart was pounding, each step taking her closer to the moment she had dreamed of for so long. When they reached the doors, they were met by a guard who, after recognizing Nara, immediately bowed. "Your Highness," the guard said, his voice filled with awe, "the Queen has been waiting for you." Nara's throat tightened. She could barely breathe as she walked inside. The palace was as grand as she remembered, but it seemed to have changed. The once lively halls now felt quiet, as if the life had drained from them during her absence. And then, at the far end of the hall, she saw her mother. Sci-Fi stood there, regal and beautiful, but her eyes were filled with pain and uncertainty. The moment she saw Nara, her face softened, and she rushed forward, pulling her daughter into a tight embrace. "Nara," the Queen whispered, her voice breaking. "You're alive." "I'm home, Mother," Nara replied, holding her tightly. "I'm home." The warmth of the palace was overwhelming after the coldness of space, and for the first time in months, Nara allowed herself to feel a deep sense of relief. She had made it home, back to the place where she belonged, to her mother, the Queen. The halls of the palace were just as magnificent as she remembered, but everything felt different now. She had been changed by her captivity, and so had her mother. Time and sorrow had marked them both, but here in this moment they were together. Again, Sci-Fi the Queen stood with Nara in her arms, holding her daughter as though she would never let go. The pain of months of separation had disappeared, replaced by a joy that Nara had longed for every single day. "My beloved daughter," Sci-Fi whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "I thought I had lost you forever." Nara could feel the Queen's tears soaking into her hair. She looked up, meeting her mother's eyes, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, she saw something in her mother's gaze. Hope. There was still a spark in Sci-Fi's eyes, a reminder that the Queen had not given up. "I'm here, Mother," Nara said softly. "I'm not going anywhere." The Queen's grip tightened around her daughter, and they stood there for a long moment just holding each other. Neither of them spoke. Words couldn't express the relief, the joy, and the weight of everything they had been through. After so many dark months, they were together again. It was more than Nara had dared to dream. After what felt like an eternity, Sci-Fi pulled back, gently wiping the tears from her face. "You've come home, and that's all that matters. But there's still much to be done." Nara nodded. She knew her mother well enough to understand that even in the face of joy, there would be work to do. The galaxy wasn't a peaceful place, and enemies still lingered. She turned to Marcus, who had been quietly standing in the background, waiting. "For the right moment, Marcus," Nara said, her voice full of gratitude. "You've done more for me than I can ever repay. I owe you my life." Marcus gave her a simple nod. "You don't owe me anything. You're free, and that's what matters." Sci-Fi turned her gaze to the human warrior, her eyes assessing him with a mix of curiosity and respect. The Queen's people had always viewed humans as a young species, one without the history or power of the older races. But seeing how Marcus had brought her daughter back, she realized that there was more to humanity than anyone had given them credit for. "You have done what no one else could," Sci-Fi said, her voice steady but filled with gratitude. "You saved my daughter. For that, I will always be in your debt." Marcus looked uncomfortable with the Queen's praise but said nothing. He simply bowed his head. "I did what anyone would have done." The Queen studied him for a long moment, her expression softening. "Perhaps," she said slowly, "but it was you who chose to act, even when the odds were against you. You are not like the others." Nara felt a wave of pride as she looked at Marcus. He had come into this mission without knowing the full scope of the dangers, yet he had stayed true to his word and saved her. It was more than she could have ever asked for. Sci-Fi finally looked away, her mind moving to the more immediate concerns. "We have much to discuss. The enemy is not far behind. They will come for us, and we need to prepare." Nara's heart dropped at the thought of the enemy still being out there, so close. They won't stop until they get what they want, she said, her voice tinged with worry. They will come for both of us, Mother, and we may not have much time. Zathira turned toward the large windows of the palace, gazing out over the kingdom she had ruled for so many years. Her face was set in a hard expression, but there was a fire behind her eyes that Nara hadn't seen in months. Then we will fight. We will not let them take what is ours. The queen's words were simple, but they carried the weight of a leader who had seen both victory and loss. Zathira had built this kingdom with her strength, and she would fight to protect it, to protect Nara no matter the cost. Marcus, you've seen what they are capable of, Zathira continued, her voice firm. We will need your help. We'll need all the strength we can gather. Marcus nodded, his gaze serious. Whatever you need, I'll help however I can. The queen's expression softened slightly, but she did not show weakness. I will not ask you to risk your life again, but I will not turn away your help either. Nara's heart swelled with gratitude. She had feared that her mother might push away the human warrior, thinking him too weak or too foreign to help. But instead, Zathira had seen the strength in Marcus. It was a moment of understanding, a rare moment when two different worlds came together in a shared cause. We will need allies, Zathira said. There are other factions in the galaxy, and not all of them are our enemies. We must seek them out. Nara turned to Marcus, who was already thinking ahead. We'll need a strategy, but first, we need to make sure the palace is secure. We can't fight a war if we don't have a safe place to plan from. Zathira nodded, her eyes scanning the room as she made her way toward the council chambers. Then we begin immediately. The time for waiting is over. As the queen and her daughter walked side by side, Marcus followed behind them, ready for whatever came next. It was strange to think that the journey had brought him here, to this foreign world where his role had shifted from a mere rescuer to an ally. Nara glanced back at Marcus, a soft smile on her lips. You've done it, Marcus. You've brought me home. Marcus smiled back, his voice warm. You're safe. It's all that matters. And as they moved forward together, Nara realized that no matter what the future held, she was not alone. She had her mother, her people, and even a human warrior by her side. They would face the challenges ahead. They would do it together. The enemy might still be out there, but for now, Nara had her family, her strength, and her hope. And that was enough to face whatever came next.